to analyse this story a little bit more, particularly from a journalist perspective. Prof. Harber, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start by getting your assessment. When investigative journalists do this kind of work and they've got various sources, there's always this danger of staying on the right side of the law. From what you're seeing, has Jacques Pauw perhaps crossed the line?
No, I don't think so. I think what he's doing is what investigative journalists do all around the world. You will recall that the New York Times Trump campaign ran details of his tax returns, even though it was not legal, but clearly in the public interest. And I'm quite sure that Jacques Pauw has a very powerful argument that publishing this material is in the public interest, and that a court will recognize that the law is too narrow and unconstitutional if it does not recognize that such material can be published in the public interest.
So when does it become public interest? Because, the president, just like you and I, have individual rights that need to be protected. When does it become public interest? When you're a public figure, or perhaps working as a receptionist, it's not. How do we decide?
Well, the factors. The one, yes, is that he's a public figure, an elected official. But if it is evidence of malfeasance, of illegal activity, of improper activity, then it seems to me clearly in the public interest for it to be published and examined in public, and for the person accused to answer for it.
Does it matter how the information is gathered? Because, there's laws about whether you can record somebody in a conversation without telling them, etc., things like that, or speaking to spies, ex-agents, for example.
This is what investigative journalists do. They take stuff that's hidden, that people want to keep out of the spotlight and hidden in a corner, and they bring it out into the open in the public interest. If they want to suppress this information, they'll have to show, I think, quite clearly it's not in the public interest to be out there. And it seems to me obvious and healthy in a democracy for us to see that let's rather have information out there, and let's hear if it's not true, or if there is an answer or an explanation from the president and from those others involved, let's give them a chance. We have a president who's constantly saying he's looking for his time in court to show his innocence. So stop going after the messenger, stop trying to prevent the evidence coming out, and take the opportunity to prove your innocence.
The State Security Agency says that this could be sensitive information that borders on security issues for the country. If that is the case, then again, I ask you, can lines be crossed where state security is involved?
But I can't see any reason why state security is involved. It's about one man's alleged illegal activity. How does it affect state security? They are right that it's sensitive. It's sensitive to those who can't answer the allegations. What they're doing here is attempting to suppress the information. What they're doing is going after the messenger rather than investigating the allegations. It's interesting that in the book there's a number of instances in which the book shows the authorities, the NPA, tax authorities, the state security agencies declining to investigate serious evidence of malfeasance. And here again, rather than investigate the evidence, they're going after the messenger. Really wrong.
All right, so now one phenomena that I've witnessed more than once is the moment you try and stop a book being published or withdrawn from the shelves, it just promotes it. And I went to a bookshop this afternoon, and the only book that was being bought was this particular book. So again, you draw people to a story rather than away from it.
I know. I was planning a marketing campaign for Jacques Pauw's book. I would have said, could you get the authorities to do this as early as possible, to draw as much attention to the book and to help boost sales? So I think it's a fantastic marketing campaign. So it's a good use of state resources in promoting a book that people need to read, I will give them credit for that.
All right, so if it does go through the legal process, I suppose it's important that we continue to get judgments to set precedents so that journalists in the future feel safe that they can do their work, investigative journalists do their work, and that the courts find that balance for us between public interest and what's not public interest.
I think that it's always good for the courts to clarify these things, and I have little doubt that in following the Constitution, the courts will. This is clearly a case of public interest. And let me just tell you something else. In 2 weeks in this country, we're hosting at Wits University the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. That means 1,100 of the world's best investigative journalists from 130 countries are coming to spend 3-4 days in this country to talk about investigative journalism. And I can tell you that I've had a flood of calls today to say, is Jacques going to be there? Can we book? Can we learn more about the situation? So what they're doing really is drawing the world's investigative journalists to pay attention to the story.
All right. We also have this issue of keeping our sources anonymous. Can we continue to enjoy that? Because, again, the accused has to show his hand, but the journalist often can hide behind this and say, it's a secret source, this is the only way I could get the story, I'm not going to divulge.
Well, I think we do have to be careful that journalists don't abuse that. It is a privilege that journalists have, and they have to be very careful not to abuse it. And there have been instances where it has been abused. But it is an important tool of investigative journalism. And so when it is properly used, we must protect it. And in fact, there's some countries have laws that it is illegal to make a pledge to keep a source secret. And I think that kind of protection for whistleblowers and sources is an important one that we should be looking at.
Do you think that we are overprotecting our journalists? Because now anyone on social media is a journalist, aren't they? They can make claims and write stuff. Do we come down harder on Jacques Pauw or Peter Ndoro, who's just running a Twitter account and saying the same things?
Well, first of all, you're not talking about any half-baked citizen journalist who's just saying wild things on their blog or in Twitter. So let's differentiate. You're talking here about the work of a respected, experienced, highly credible, highly respected journalist, and that's clearly different. Look at the important work that journalists like Jacques and others have done in the last year to expose these stories, which I must say have not been knocked down, these stories about Gupta leaks.
All right, okay. So I don't know if the word Gupta was the magical word that broke that line, but that was Professor Anton Harber speaking to us about Jacques Pauw's book, President's Keepers, which is flying off the shelves at the minute. As I said in that interview, I went to a local store and that was the only book that was being written. So it does seem, and I think it's called the Streisand effect, when you bring attention to something to try and repress it, people just become more fascinated with it. But anyway, we'll keep a tab on that particular story for you. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have more news for you. Stay with us.